What is up, hotties? Welcome back to another episode of Stay Hot. I'm Blaiden Kirk, joined as always by my two favorite co-hosts of all time, Matthew Sponhour and Theo Ash. We have a great episode planned for you all today. Today we're going to be touching on a lot of the free agent moves that were made this offseason, a lot of players on new teams. We're going to be taking some of our favorite picks of those players that are on new teams and just talking about which ones we like the most. Now, one thing I do want to point out, we're not gonna do like Jalen Ramsey or Jessie Bates, and I'm glad that we all kind of made the note to not pick those guys because yes, they're positive additions, but they would have been good fits on any team, right? So I don't know about
that. I don't know if
you don't think Jalen Ramsey would have been a good fit on any team.
Maybe if you feel like he's a particularly good fit on Miami, then you could say him then.
I suppose. I don't know. It feels more interesting to be like, this team had a very glaring need. They went out and got a good player, maybe not like the best at their position or like one of the top 3 players at the position, but like this is still a very good addition. So I'm just glad that we were all kind of on board with that ideology there. But before we get into that,
in the dead of the offseason, my mindset on it was like in the dead of the offseason, there was like a flurry of moves during free agency, and we're kind of circling back to maybe talk about some guys that we hadn't talked about already. And I don't know if we've talked about Bates yet, so maybe I'll make some sort of video on him. But
I guess we haven't like talked about him like in the off, but like we talked about him a lot during like the season and during the playoffs, I feel like, because there was like that stretch where he like wasn't playing super well and then he turns
he's
it on.
He's pretty good. I just don't know if he's worth the contract that he got.
Yeah.
Hitting on Bates, he's a good signing for Atlanta to be like a deep safety like that. I think to pay him like a top, like the top safety in the league. I guess I don't know off the top of my head because he wasn't in my notes. How many?
64 million, 36 guaranteed. I don't know where that ranks him. Not 1, I would assume. Probably like 4.
Yeah, I think the Bengals are going to be fine not paying him. I'll say that.
I agree.
But if you're the Falcons and you haven't had a good defense in, who knows how long, and you've got Desmond Ridder at quarterback who's not making much money. So you've got, the stuff to spend. You might as well bring in a guy like Bates, who's certainly a very solid player and probably an upgrade over what they've had in years past. And that's just kind of the general sense of it.
Right. I mean, they're the best safety they had in the past 2 years is what, Keanu Neal?
I don't know off the top of my head.
Am I forgetting someone? I don't. Falcons fans, let us know who the best safety of the last decade is for you guys. But Matthew, how are you guys doing today? We haven't gotten to talk about how your days are going this beautiful Sunday.
I'm doing pretty well. I watched the first episode of the Tour de France documentary on Netflix. And it was, I really liked the first episode and would recommend, if you like sports and you like competition, I would recommend checking it out, even if cycling doesn't particularly grab you. The doc is pretty intense, at least the first episode. Definitely got me hooked. After just about like 2 minutes of watching, I was like, oh yeah, this is going to be pretty cool. So it's all about last year's tour, and then this year starts on the 1st. So it gives you kind of a breakdown of all the teams, I guess. And then I guess you can kind of pick who to root for come June 1st. And I think that the profiles on the competitors and the teams seem to be very well done. And I was very invested. So that's my little TV recommendation to start off the episode.
That's neat. I've been thinking about, if I was going to get into another sport, it would be like Formula One racing. I just think like fast cars are just so cool.
There's just a lot of sports Twitter that cares about Formula One, and I think Netflix has a documentary about F1 racing.
That's what I heard. They said that because I tweeted about it, and someone was like, "You need to watch this, and it'll give you like a really great intro." So that's why I brought it, because they have the same thing.
I think the Tour de France kind of follows the same beats in terms of how it's structured. It feels like, and I don't know. Maybe if you're really into cycling, I was talking to Twitter user sports tweeter Matthias about the doc, and he's very much into cycling.
Okay.
And he said there were some storylines that he wanted to see that got missed in the doc.
Oh,
but like I don't know that, right? Like I don't know. I don't care. You can withhold any information you want from me, and it's not like, oh, I wish I was there, because I don't know it. So as an extreme casual, I thought it was cool. But F1, I know Verstappen, that's about the only driver.
I don't know anyone. I just know cars go fast and it looks cool as shit.
Verstappen, or however you pronounce it, is the best of the F1.
Okay.
Drivers. Okay. This I know.
Got you. Matt, how are you doing today?
Doing all right. I went out and saw the Reds game on Friday. Got to see Ellie De La Cruz hit the cycle in person, so that's pretty sick.
Nice. What does that mean? I actually have no idea. I saw people tweeting about that. I have no idea what that means.
It means you hit a home run, a triple, a double, and a single all in the same game. It's only happened 300 odds, like some odd times.
That's crazy.
So, I mean, and it was... They won 11-10. They've lost the last two since, but Atlanta's a good team. So they're a lot of fun. They're a dope team to watch. I've been to 2 games this year, and both of them have been 5-run comebacks. So they're nuts.
You're lucky.
Ellie,
you need to go to all the games.
We're going next week, aren't we?
Yeah.
So, well, if you guys want to talk about some actual football, talk about some free agency moves that we like, some fits that we like across the NFL. We're taking a look at NFL players that are on new teams. Theo, why don't you start us off? I'm actually surprised that you have Marcus Davenport here. That shocked me.
I was more interested in the signing more than I think it's a great fit. I did not quite pick my players to break down in the same way you did, where it's fits that you like. It's kind of fits that I haven't totally studied yet. And watching Davenport and his 0.5 sack season, I definitely think that he outperformed that number last year with the Saints. I think that he looks very powerful. He's a little bit like Tyree Wilson, really. Like Tyree Wilson and Marcus Davenport were not all too dissimilar coming out of their respective schools in their respective years. And, you know, Wilson went, 7th overall, 6th overall, something like that.
Right.
And Davenport went a little bit later, but the draft capital given up to get him was probably about the same, considering the Saints traded up a first-round pick to take him. And he's real powerful, and he's got really long arms. And when he locks his arm out, I mean, offensive linemen can't really reach him at all. And then he has a powerful bull rush, and from that position, he can disengage. And his pressure numbers over the past couple of years have been better than the sack numbers. But it's been a lot of years, and the sack numbers have never really come. So at this point on the second contract, you know, you're wondering if they ever will, because in terms of bend, I didn't see much of it at all. And when you can't really threaten around the outside, it's tough to be a, 10 plus, 11 plus sack a year guy. And I just don't know if that's really there for him. In terms of his run defense, I don't think he's particularly twitchy. So it's like he might be able to stack, but to shed and then get into the tackle in one quick motion, I think that he can do it. It's just not, he's not one of the best at it. He's not like notably quick for how big he is, which you might expect for someone who is a first round pick like that. He's about exactly as quick as you think he is when you just look at him on the field.
Yeah, I've got to say, Theo, I'm not too excited about how this bodes based on what you said. I know.
Well, he had 0.5 sacks last year. 0.5. He played a bunch of games. He didn't even get one. All right. So like, there's not going to be this, he's going to be his best season yet, and he's great at everything, and it was a total fluke. Like, there's some real weaknesses to him, but he does have, like, the power is notable. Like, it really is, I think, strongly above average. And he's got a couple moves. It's not elite. And the counters, I think, could use some work when the first thing doesn't fail. But when he really is going into it, like, I'm going to chop the hands away, I'm going to cross chop, something like that. Like, he's got that in there. So between that and the power, I think that there's just enough there to be, more than, he had 9 sacks before, and his pressure rate has been a lot higher in the past. And in Brian Flores' defense, I think that if you were to move him around and put him over guards more than the Saints did, I don't think that's a bad idea, because if you're going to be rushing a guard, I feel like the bull rush and power is more of what you're looking for from a guy who lines up kind of everywhere. And I do think that he's got the strength to do it. So I think I like him to bounce back from a disappointing 2022 season with the Vikings in 2023. I think that he is powerful enough to be a kind of a chess piece that can play inside and out. As far as the contract goes, I think it's a fine deal. I don't think it's a steal. I don't think that it's a too massive of an overpay. And really, I think after watching him, I thought this is a fine piece to a defense. And it's not really a hot take either direction that he's a steal, or, he is what his 0.5 sack season is. I think that he's a downgrade over Zadarius Smith, but enough to be a good starter or a fine starter in that spot. And I think I was a little bit confused about how the Saints rotated last year, because towards the end, it was not him and Jordan out there at the same time. Cam Jordan, that is. It was like Cam Jordan and Kapagsa. I don't know how to, number 90. I don't know how to pronounce his last name. And I wish they were on the field a little bit more towards the end. It just really feel like maybe it was injury, but he kind of fell out of favor there towards the end. But I think a change of scenery is going to be good for him. He's got the inside-out versatility that I assume Flores is going to take advantage of, although I wouldn't want him dropping into coverage, I don't think. I think maybe if it's a pass rushing down, like put him at...
I would want him dropping.
Have someone else drop, not him, Danielle Hunter or something, I don't know. But I think it was a perfectly acceptable signing, and it's not a really crazy take or anything like that, but I watched it and I was like, okay, that's a starter right there, but not a good one. Not a great one.
I think that's a very bold take.
I know.
Guys,
I know.
I'm a little disappointed because I saw that and I thought you were hyping up Marcus Davenport once again, and I was ready for it. And now you come on to this podcast and you just say he's okay. Have a little bit of faith.
His power is real good. It's just there's a certain amount of bend that you need as a pass rusher to be an elite one, and I just don't think that he quite has it. And I think if his moves really develop, like if he can really get the counters down, but it's like they're not really there. So
do you think Tyree Wilson has that bend?
I think he has a little bit more than... I think if he can time up the snap right, I think it'll be better, and he'll be more of a threat along the outside shoulder than
so the answer is no.
Davenport is. Because he's got strength up the arc, and so does Davenport, I suppose. But I do think that Tyree Wilson is just so tall. He takes kind of longer steps and gets there faster. And from that position, he's got so much strength that he can hold his line. Who knows if it translates to the league, but I would be pretty disappointed if he doesn't try to win that way a little bit more frequently than Davenport does. And it doesn't have to be much, because the power is intimidating. And from the power, you can work other things. And for some people, it's from the bend, you can work certain things, And I think that I think with Tyree Wilson, there will be just enough of an outside threat if he can time up the snap better and eliminate all the false steps that he takes to threaten that way and occasionally win that way. That'll never be his game. Certainly it's possible that he ends up just like Davenport and it never really comes, and he just is a power guy over and over and over again. And it's like, he doesn't have it. That is absolutely in the range of possibilities for him, but I'm hoping that there's a little bit more there, and I think there can be.
I think PFF compared him to Davenport, and I read it was
it doesn't surprise me if you look at their scouting reports. It's about the exact same. And yeah, it's certainly someone that I thought of as like length and power. Wilson is a bit more of a... I think he's even longer than Davenport is. He's not quite as stocky. He's like taller and leaner, it looks like. And Davenport is a little bit more thick. He's thicker.
Today's episode of Stay Hot is brought to you by our friends over at Oakley. Express your style and build a look that's made for you. Listen, when I used to play golf, I was always rocking Oakley, whether it be visors, whether it be glasses, whether it be gloves. So you always got to trust Oakley, man. And they're really changing the game out here. And it's time to discover a whole new world of possibilities. Do you run, golf, train, or maybe you just want to look like your favorite athlete, Lamar Jackson or Justin Jefferson? Then you need to get yourself a pair of Oakleys today. Here at Stay Hot, we're all about look good, feel good, play good. That's why Oakley is the perfect partner for us. We don't leave the house in the morning without our Oakleys. And with summer just around the corner, that means you need to upgrade your sunglasses game now. Did you know that Oakley even offers prism lens technology? Now, what is that, you might ask? Well, it's a proprietary technology unique to Oakley, perfectly suited for both peak performance and everyday settings. Want to know more? Well, you can head on over to Oakley.com and do your own research. And while you're there, go ahead and get yourself a pair of everyday glasses that'll be sure to change your look for the better. When you wear Oakley, there really is more than meets the eye. Don't trust me. Try for yourself. I've worn tons of sunglasses brands in my life, and I can assure you Oakley is not only the best looking, but the best quality out there. Theo always mentions how they literally change the colors in your everyday world. It's crazy. So head on over to Oakley.com for more information today. That's fair. I'm shocked that you just came and you're just like, yeah.
Yeah, he's fine.
Right.
He'd probably I would expect him to line up
so
3
weird.
tech plenty of times, over guards plenty of times, and I would expect, if I was the Vikings, 7 sacks and a pressure rate in 10-11%. I think that's probably a valid expectation for him, which is a pretty good defensive lineman.
It's an improvement from last year for sure.
It's not, because they had Za'Darius to do that last year, but Za'Darius demanded a trade.
I'm saying it's an improvement from Davenport.
Oh,
last year.
yes.
No, not an improvement from Za'Darius, but Za'Darius is in Cleveland now. But that's not the Cleveland guy that I like the most. I mean, really, if we wanted to, we could sit here and just list off all the additions the Browns made: Elijah Moore, Za'Darius Smith, Ogbo Okoronkwo, Dalvin Tomlinson. But the guy that I like the most is the last one. They did have a great offseason. I think Dalvin is the biggest impact addition, though. I cannot remember the last time the Browns had a really good interior defensive lineman. So I'm really excited to see how this season goes, especially obviously the impact that he's going to have as an anchor in the run defense, and he's going to be able to push guards, which we haven't had in a long time. He's going to be able to move people around and make his own direct impact in the run game. But also the impact of we have really small linebackers, right? JOK is really tiny. He's not really going to be able to shed blocks quickly and disperse second level blockers. But if Dalvin Tomlinson can take up those guys and can eliminate those guys from getting to the second level, then all of a sudden that makes JOK's job easier. I mean, just yes. Across the board, he's going to completely change the defense. I've never been more excited. The Browns defense should be.
They killed the offseason, but
they should be ferocious.
Who did you pick as your player to talk about?
That's Dalvin. Wait, it was Dalvin.
Oh, you did pick Dalvin. That's right. Yeah. You did pick Dalvin. Yes.
So that's why I just
we were
went
on
that
a tangent
rant
about the Browns. I apologize.
No.
This is in the
rundown.
No, the pivot was so smooth that
it was so smooth.
I didn't even notice. But keep going about Dalvin then.
he's like, no, keep going. No, when I think about the Browns run defense and all it was the worst in the league last year. So the one thing that they really needed to add was a high level interior defender, and they added Za'Darius, and they added Okoronkwo, and they added who's the safety they added from Kansas City,
Thornhill.
Yeah, Juan Thornhill. And I don't have any negations with those additions, and I don't have any negations with the addition of Elijah Moore on offense either. But it's bringing in Dalvin. I would have brought him in for almost any price point, almost any, not literally any, but almost any price point. And I would have been happy with it because we just like literally we just had no other juice at that spot at all. So
yeah, and Za'Darius was even better than Dalvin was last year. Like Dalvin Tomlinson, as far as the Vikings and the Browns go, if we're talking about the Vikings getting Davenport and then trading Za'Darius to the Browns, and that kind of fits with both of our topics here. Za'Darius is definitely more of a hooper than Marcus Davenport is. Like Za'Darius is a guy who can break out some spins, and he's someone who has a bit more moves, I feel like, and then is a little bit more of an exciting watch than someone who's bull rush, and he had a bunch of sacks last year.
I mean, they'll be doing different things, right? I expect Za'Darius is going to fill the role that Clowney was supposed to be doing, which is to be a complimentary pass rusher to Garrett, right? Mm-hmm. Because Clowney wasn't really doing that, especially not last year. But Dalvin Tomlinson his number one job, fix the run defense like right away. Like that is the number one focus that I have with him. That's all I have on that. Dalvin's going to be a great addition. Matt, I'm not surprised to see Mr. Von Bell on this list for you. Carolina Panther. Tell us about him.
Yeah, I thought it was a really good addition for them. Bell is kind of a do-it-all strong safety, I'd classify him as. He can line up in the box. The Bengals blitzed him a fair number of times. He lines up against tight ends relatively successfully. If he's too high with somebody else, he's pretty good. The one thing I'd say is you don't really want him in single high. He doesn't quite have the range to do that consistently. But if he gets put in that situation, it's not, a guaranteed disaster or anything. It's just you don't want to regularly line him up there. But what makes me excited about this fit for the Panthers is that I think he opens up Jeremy Chin to do a lot of the stuff that Jeremy Chin is supposed to be doing. And this was kind of the challenge for the Panthers going into this offseason, is that they're changing what they're doing on defense. They're going from a 4-3 to a 3-4. And a lot of the guys that they're getting are sort of just people to fill a new role that they didn't have somebody filling before because, again, they're going to a new system. And while Bell, I guess, doesn't really fall under that category because, a safety is a safety kind of regardless of what you're doing in the front seven. It is true that I think he's the guy I trust the most to fill the role. He feels less like a role player, more like someone who I know will be solid in their position. And I think Jeremy Chin is going to be able to move down towards the line of scrimmage and do the stuff that he's supposed to do more because of it. Because last season he was away from the line of scrimmage the most he'd ever been. I think he had more snaps outside of the box than in. I could be wrong about that. That might not be true, but it was the least in the box he'd ever played. And he's a very physical guy who should be on the line of scrimmage and that type of stuff. So Bell, I think, just fills a role that they need filled and opens up other guys to go do what they're supposed to be doing. And I think that's probably the definition of a good fit.
Yeah, I imagine Jeremy Chin kind of can play in the when I think of Jeremy Chin, I'd want him like what Kyle Hamilton is doing for Baltimore right now. And Kyle Hamilton, he played up high at Notre Dame a decent amount, but you never see him do it with the Ravens. He's someone that they basically treat like an overhang or slot corner, taking the flats and blitzing and being physical and getting involved in the run fits. And that's how I want Jeremy Chin to be. Like, he's really athletic and can operate in space, but he's also big and physical and strong. So anytime you get someone who is, you get a stat like, well, he's spending more and more time outside of the box. Like that's not really where you want him. I think you want him playing like a zone underneath, triggering and tackling on anything underneath because he's just so physical and getting involved with the run fits. Like that is ideally, I think, and jamming tight ends and dealing with slot receivers more than maybe outside guys deep down the field. So if Von Bell is able to unlock that version of Jeremy Chin, and Von Bell can be that guy too, and maybe they think Von Bell is Jeremy Chin is really good up high and he performed well and they want him to do that. Well, that gives their slot corner, like perhaps,
I think,
or a big nickel type of look more credibility, because I think they want to spend time in big nickel because their corners are so bad, right? Like they should have all three safeties. I don't think you want, like, if you're playing single high, I don't think you want Chin back there, and I don't think you want Bell back there. You want, who's their free safety, Matt?
Woods
back there. But that doesn't mean you don't want Bell and Chin on the field at the same time. I think if you're looking at their secondary and just trying to put like the best 5 or 6 corners out there, I guess 5 defensive backs out there, 3 of them should be safeties because the cornerback depth is so limited. So it's like, I don't know if there were great corners in free agency, but they got a pretty good safety.
Yeah. I'm still concerned about this secondary. I still don't think the Panthers defense is going to be that good. There are a lot of positions where they're an injury away from being a disaster, but I really did like the Bell signing.
Mm-hmm.
Matt,
and if you're in big nickel, all you need is one corner. So it's like you don't need CJ Henderson and Dante Jackson out there. So hopefully that's enough.
Yeah. And Matt, I looked it up. You are right on the numbers there on how much Jeremy Chin, his alignment has changed. It's not, he's still playing more in the box than he is over top. But he was playing 500 box snaps in 2021 and a little under 400 last year. So it's pretty substantial.
Yeah. And then he's just not great up top. He's not like that. And he came into the league as kind of a tweener, and he just doesn't have you got to be really sharp if you're going to be up high. You got to really like read and know where you're going right away. And I'm not saying that he can't do that, but that's a very different thing from reading like a run fit versus reading like, where are the quarterback's eyes and where do I need to be closing to?
You can't really have a gambler or anybody who's like guessing at safety, because one mistake and it's a big touchdown. Like Chin down in the box, if you're down in the box and you read something out wrong, you're going to be pretty much fine. Like maybe they run through the gap and someone else cleans it up farther down the field than it would have been, but it's not usually a mistake like that's too killer. And I haven't watched too much Jeremy Chin to give you like a full rundown of exactly what changed between 2021 and 2022 and the flaws. But if we're using PFF grades, like it took a big dip from 2021 to 2022. And I don't totally trust their grades on safeties, but I do believe, just based on the player that Jeremy Chin is, going from the box to up high more is probably not what you want. And it makes sense that his coverage grade went from like a 74 to a 58 in those years. Now, pressure will be taken off of him, and that's good because he's still a useful player for sure.
I read this.
I do think PFF is always kind of underrated, Chin, maybe a little bit.
I read this backwards on his alignment. So it was 390 box snaps in 2020, 510 in 2021, 174 box snaps in 2022. That's really low.
Who's banged up now?
Yeah, but even like just compared to like his free safety snaps, they were like at the same level. And then he played most of his snaps in the slot.
Okay.
Yeah. So hopefully that'll change.
Right. Theo, your next guy, another shocker from Theo Ash NFL, shocker. Tremaine Edmonds. Yeah, these are two just like players I feel like you've been critical of in the past, and now you're like, yeah, it could be interesting.
Well, I just have takes on Tremaine Edmonds. Look,
okay,
I'm not super high on Tremaine Edmonds. Like I said at the top of the show, these are not fits that I'm like totally in love with and I think are going to be home runs. These are just players I wanted to research and talk about because I didn't think that I've really made my opinion on these signings. No, but for Edmonds, I've said that it is a signing that I wouldn't have made. I would have probably just paid Roquan Smith if I'm going to invest that much money in linebacker. And still had this on my mind all these months later, and I kind of wanted to articulate exactly why that is. And it's not Bears fans who are probably turning the show off right now. Like, it's not that bad because Tremaine Edmonds is a better fit for what Eberflus wants than Roquan is. Like, that's probably true. Like, they want their linebackers to keep eyes on the quarterbacks, just kind of hop around, read their eyes, drift into passing lanes, and when the ball is thrown, get your arms up and make plays, really make plays. And they want length to do that. Darius Leonard was the ideal. He wasn't carrying guys up the seam a whole lot. He wasn't playing man coverage a whole lot. It was underneath zone, eyes on quarterback, get in the lane, put your arms up, disrupt the throw when it happens. Roquan Smith is small. He's short and he has short arms. So he's just not really that big of an obstacle to throw it around. So if you're not going to utilize him like running down the field and doing crazy and mugging him up and having him cover large grounds and disguising him, like, you're not really getting the most out of Roquan Smith. So you might as well trade Roquan Smith away and then bring in a guy who you think can do what you want a linebacker to do more than Roquan does. My problem with the signing is you don't need to pay like $90 million or whatever it was, $70 million. I don't know. You don't need to pay all that money for a linebacker to do those exact things, I think. Like, just find someone cheaper who also has the length, because it's not that hard of a job to stand there and read the eyes of the, like, it doesn't require an insane amount of athleticism or, in my opinion, like high-end skill to play linebacker in Eberflus's scheme. Darius Leonard was a special case because he forces 8 turnovers per 17 games he plays in terms of interceptions and forced fumbled. I mean, that's ridiculous, right? 8, like every other game, he's forcing a fumble or getting a pick over the course of his career, and it's been years now. So when you're paying Darius Leonard or Shaquille Leonard, I'm sorry, he's going by Shaquille now, and I should say that, but when you're paying Shaq Leonard, it's because of the turnovers. It's not because of what he's doing in coverage or what he's doing in run support. It's because he forces a game-breaking, like a game-winning play almost every other game over the course of his career. That's why you pay him. Tremaine Edmonds doesn't do that. Tremaine Edmonds has forced like 3 turnovers in his entire career, 2 forced fumbles. I'm sorry, he's forced 7 in his whole career, which is, you know, I guess a fine number. I mean, I don't particularly always think of like production on the ball for linebackers is like the main thing. But when it's as notable as Leonard, I think you have to stand up and take note. But with Tremaine Edmonds, it's not happening nearly as frequently. And maybe they think they can teach him to create more turnovers. But if you can teach him that, why do you need to pay like all that money for him? Like, why not draft someone? And maybe it was just a weak linebacker class and they just didn't like anybody and they just needed a linebacker more than anything in the world. But I think if you have Roquan Smith and there's not really another Darius or Shaquille Leonard out there, like, I would just probably adjust the scheme instead of paying a bunch of money for a more mundane linebacker. And so that's my thoughts on the thing. I think it's fine. I think it's a good scheme fit. I just don't think linebackers are like super crucial in that scheme unless they're creating turnovers at a rate that Shaquille Leonard is doing. That is kicking my ass.
So Theo, can I ask you this? If your argument is that you think that skill set can be found for cheaper, do you have a player in mind that fits the frame of Tremaine Edmonds, but maybe would be a little bit more low profile and wouldn't cost as much?
Jack Sanborn, the guy on the team who played pretty well last year. I don't know how long he is, but like, if I'm them, I might sign TJ Edwards, and then I would probably just have rolled with Jack Sanborn, the guy on the team who took over after they traded Roquan in the middle of the season. And I guess his arm length and wingspan is also real short, so he wasn't quite what they were going for. But I don't know.
I just think like the only linebackers that I can think of with that kind of length is like Fred Warner and Edmonds.
you're right, but it's like, how much are you paying for length? You know, like I would adjust the scheme if you really need length. It just is such a departure of what we heard after the Roquan trade. It's like, oh, you know, linebackers, we've done studies on positional value, and linebackers aren't one of those guys that we need to pay. And then they're like, well, we'll give a bunch of money to Edmonds. And it's like, well, what is it? Because I kind of agreed, like, okay, if you're going to ship out Roquan because you don't think you need a middle linebacker to have an elite defense, fine. But then why are you downgrading? And Bears fans keep being like, well, you know, we got a second and we're paying, you know, just as much money for a scheme. It's like, I guess it's good that you got a second, but that's a separate transaction than signing Edmonds. You're still wrapping up tons of money in the linebacker position for what I believe is a less talented linebacker. And then Roquan went to Baltimore, and Baltimore ran a defensive system where it's like he's running all over the place. He's mugged up. He's blitzing. He's covering guys in man. Like he's doing all these different things and playing Mike and being closer to the passing strength. And he turned their defense around. Like the numbers after Roquan Smith joined were like fantastic, and he made second team All Pro or whatever it was. It's like, if I think a really good defensive coordinator should just play more like that when they have a guy like Roquan Smith, instead of, you know, trying to force him in a round hole when he's a square peg, and then paying a bunch of money when it's like you were kind of on the right track with trading him away. That like linebacker isn't crazy valuable in the scheme unless they're creating a lot of turnovers, which Tremaine Edmonds doesn't do. So yeah, it's just a confusing signing, and I think it'll go fine. Like I think Tremaine Edmonds will be like better than the alternative, but I just don't think it's a super efficient use of money, and I don't track their logic. So that is my take on that situation, just fully laid out. I think it'll go fine too. That's the thing. It's like, it's going to be fine. Like he is what they ask him to do. Like he was fine for the Bills last year, but could that money have been spent better, like on an edge rusher when their front seven is so bad still and their pass rush is so bad? Like probably. I'd rather see something like that, a trade get made and a contract given out. Like, I don't know, but to give it to an off-ball linebacker just because he can clog a passing lane and read an eyes, it's like, I don't know. I think you could have spent less money on that and then more money on the edge instead of vice versa. So that's my take on it.
I mean, I'm not gonna disagree with you. I don't know. I just think I just don't know if you would have found a player that they were really looking for. I think maybe they just got to a point where like, this is ultimately what we was like. You can have like a take on like the linebacker position early on in the season and be like, okay, we don't need to do this. But then when you're actually looking at what you want at the linebacker position and then realize that you're going to have to pay that price point to get there, it might contradict what you said earlier. But then what? Are you just going to like fall victim to sunk cost fallacy and have like no one? So I don't know. That's just kind of a tough eval for me.
Yeah, but I just think
the next guy,
if you're gonna trade Roquan Smith away because you don't think linebackers are like super valuable, why would you then turn around and sign Tremaine Edmonds?
They probably just like changed their mind. They like realized they needed something.
Well, if they're changing their mind, like 4 months and they're stupid.
I guess.
I agree. I don't think what Edmonds does is that valuable, and he's a good player. But this is kind of like, yeah, like, okay, people view it as like Roquan, and we got a second, we got rid of Roquan, and we brought back somebody as good as Edmonds. I think Roquan's better, and I think it's like opting to take on a draft pick for the sake of like going from somebody who really is like maybe like the number 1 or number 2 at their position to somebody who is really good but screams being the type of guy that's getting like the top end contract who is only pretty good. And that's like the number one thing you want to avoid when you see guys in free agency. Typically it's, this guy's pretty good, but you have to give him the top end contract and they're not quite like tier 1, you know?
Yeah.
I also, what the Bears have the Bears analytics what was that photo?
The cylinder.
What I'm talking about?
Yes.
The cylinder.
Yeah. I do remember the cylinder.
Don't question the Bears' analytics cylinder, I say.
I guess that's true. They've got a cylinder, and I just have whatever I have. I don't know. But, like, I think Bears fans, if they didn't sign Tremaine Edmonds and they were rolling with Jack Sanborn and TJ Edwards right now, I don't think any Bears fans would be, like, too disappointed by that. Like, they would have found a way, just like they were doing after the Roquan Smith trade. Like, this is where their logic was at. Like, Sanborn has flashed. TJ Edwards is underrated and, like, was a good bargain, which I agree with. TJ Edwards is not a crazy athlete, but he's smart. And if I want him, he's good. Like, I've seen him make some crazy plays where he's just, like, standing there. The quarterback makes a decision and flips his eyes and cocks back to throw. And TJ Edwards is on it like that. Like, TJ Edwards is pretty good at this, I think. I thought that was a value signing for the Bears. And if it was just them and Sanborn, every Bears fans it would be very easy to convince yourself, like, we traded away Roquan, we got a second, the linebacker position is fine, it's not a premium position in the NFL, we have $70 million to spend elsewhere, you know? Mm-hmm. But instead, it was kind of this about face that I just don't quite understand. But maybe he's all pro. I don't know. He is the longest, tallest linebacker there has ever been. So.
Right.
Edmonds does have his strengths. He's 15. Yeah, he just got his driver's license, so he'll be able to drive to practice instead of having Milano drive him.
Oh my God. Anyway, the next guy that I have is another Vikings deep heart, Eric Kendricks to the Chargers, and he was a little bit underwhelming in coverage last year. I guess a little bit inconsistent, which
that's not good.
Not exciting to see. Right. As he enters 31, it's like you're not very excited about that. But I think as a run defender, he still has some juice, which the Chargers could still definitely use. And I think he's still, like, strong enough to just, like, bully blockers, in the box and, take down offensive linemen and shed off, like, push pull. And I think he's still, like, smart enough as far as, like, a football IQ standpoint to be a positive add to their linebacker room, because I don't know who else they would have, because they lost. Who did they lose? I'm trying. I can't. I
don't know who they lost in their linebacker room, but their linebackers are so terrible that, like, whoever it was not important, because there's just absolutely no chance that the Chargers had a good linebacker last year. Like,
I thought they did. Maybe I'm thinking of someone else. I don't know.
Drew Tranquil?
I thought they did have. No, Drew Tranquil is terrible.
Van Noy?
Maybe he's Van. But Van Noy is not really like an off-ball backer. The same way.
No. Well, like, those are the only two that they lost, so you got to be thinking of one of those two.
Okay, then I'm thinking of a completely different scenario then. Anyway.
Troy Reader, which you shouldn't be thinking of. Derek Tuszka.
Just stop.
Damon Lloyd.
Yeah, their linebackers are terrible, is the point. Anyone they have had, Eric Kendricks, I think, will be a massive upgrade over. It is like, I think it could be almost like a Bobby Wagner if he's going downhill in pass coverage, but he still has, like, the IQ and run defense. But I think he's still a better athlete than Wagner is at this point. So I still don't think it would be a total negative. And I also, how much can we really how much of, like, an analysis can we really do on Eric Kendricks' coverage given Ed Donatell's defense last year? Like, how much of that is Eric Kendricks and how much of that is the defense? Is the defensive scheme? I guess.
I think I'm not really moved by the Eric Kendricks signing for the Chargers. Like, I don't think he was ever an elite run defender, and I think he's gotten worse over the years. Like, and they just need run defense. Like, they need a spine of their defense. And to me, what would really move me for the Chargers if they could make a move for someone like Demario Davis, or if the Saints were willing to move off of him, or someone just a little bit more physical in the middle of the defense. And it's like, I just don't think Eric Kendricks fixes that description. And, like, maybe he teaches And maybe they're just bringing him in to be a teacher for Kenneth Murray, but Kenneth Murray has been
That's true.
Really bad to the point where it's like, I don't think a few words from Eric Kendricks is going to fix it. I don't know. Like,
yeah, it's like a $30 million. I don't even know what his contract is.
I think their problems are going to be about the same. And I think if they can't sign Drew Tranquil, like Eric Kendricks maybe keeps it about the same, because then if they didn't sign anybody, it would be Kenneth Murray and who else, and it can't be that. It cannot be anybody worse than Kenneth Murray.
Yeah.
But I don't, it just seems like they're kind of standing pat.
I don't know. I think Eric Kendricks at least provides you some true like sideline to sideline athleticism, like speed, that I don't think they really had before. So even if you're like, well, he's not like this true Demario Davis linebacker, like where he just like barrels downhill. Maybe not, but he still gives you a little bit of. He still gives you like the athleticism and I think the vision to still make plays in the run game that they just like otherwise do not have. Like I still think it could be a net positive addition for them just because of the skill set that he brings.
Mm-hmm.
But
okay. Yeah, I could see that. He's smart. I mean, he's definitely a very intelligent player.
So it's like, and at the very least, he's if you're a Mike linebacker, has that intelligence, all that does help the defense. Like the one, like I've been ultra critical of Anthony Walker, but I was talking to some Browns fans recently, and I've dialed back on that because they're pointing out like what Anthony Walker adds that you don't really see is like he's a leader on the defense. He's telling people where to go and where to be, and like JOK isn't doing that, right? Even if you think JOK is a better player, you need Walker on the field to be that vocal leader, to be that quarterback of the defense. And Eric Kendricks.
I mean, we talk about the Bears analytics cylinder. From that same video, they laid out their most important traits from every position. And for linebacker, one of them was, leadership, communication skills. And that's something, you say you wouldn't get that from JOK. It's like, I don't know. Would we get that from JOK? I have no idea.
Well, actually, I'm not going to say if we will get that from JOK, but like, if, from the perspective of like, he was a rookie and now it's like,
but yes,
so you wouldn't expect him to come in right away and do that.
Understanding defenses and getting the defense set and knowing where everyone can be. Yeah. Like if you can, as a linebacker, just eliminate a few mistakes a year and get everybody pointed, like that is valuable. And it's something we can't know. And Eric Kendricks is making more money than Drew Tranquil. Like Drew Tranquil did not command as much money as Eric Kendricks did on the open market. So hypothetically, they're upgrading in some way, even though I don't think Eric Kendricks
what is Kendricks' contract?
I think it's 6 years, $6 million a year for 2 years. So about $13 million, all said and done. So, yeah, it's a fine signing, but I don't think it fixes their issues. I don't think it's a marquee signing at this point, but it can't really get worse than Chargers linebackers play. So
it can't. You're right. It can't get worse, Matt. Matt, you have Theo's former Offensive Player of the Year pick, Darren Waller.
Oh God, why you calling me out like this?
Going to his former 2-15 team, I believe.
Oh, come on.
Yeah. I'm a big fan of Waller to New York. I think that there's a lot of good stuff that they can do with him. He's one of those tight ends where people will be like, actually, he's kind of a receiver. Like, he's not even really a tight end. And they're kind of right. He's like a big receiver, which is good because I don't think Vegas had quite the flexibility because of who they had to like move him around as much as I'm hoping the Giants will. And I think it's a big deal because you saw so much like the Giants just didn't have the guys to really stretch the field last year. Like Bellinger, right? Not a bad player. I mean, he's a 4th round rookie and he was starting and he went and did his thing. And there's, he does classic tight end stuff. But I mean, he had like 5 targets past 9 yards. past like 10 yards. And we know from Daboll's time in Buffalo, that's not what he wants to do with his tight end. He'd like to be able to get his tight end downfield and vertical and line him up all over the place because we know he did it with Knox. So now that you're getting Waller there, I just think it opens up a lot of things for him. And then there's also like the truth of like, well, if Daboll can scheme open so-and-so who isn't that good with the ball in their hands, and imagine Waller who is good with the ball in his hands. And it's like, yeah, I can't disagree with that either. So I'd say I'm relatively excited to see what they do with him. And I honestly would not be surprised if he is like I kind of view him as like wide receiver 1 on that team, Like that's the guy.
Yeah.
So I think it's really exciting for him. And I think he's still super talented. So
they really didn't have any downfield like weapons at all last year. So
it was hilariously bad. Well, they had what's his name? I have it in front of me, luckily. Yes, Slayton is a downfield target.
I guess, yeah. Yeah, Slayton
wouldn't
had
know
a pretty good
because Daniel Jones just did not throw it down the field. He threw it down the field like way less than any other quarterback. So to grab Hyatt and Waller, who can threaten down the field, like Waller, not in quite the same way, but up the seam, you can still take some shots to him, 10, 15 plus yards down the field up the seam. I like his route running ability. He's knows how to deal with contact down the field with some arm overs, like an edge rusher. He has made great adjustments to the ball. Like he's got great hands. Well, no, he doesn't have great hands, but he doesn't have reliable hands, but he's capable of making some pretty spectacular catches. I will say that. And I think about him with Daboll and all the play action that they'll be running and rollouts and just let him cross the entire formation and run away from safeties and linebackers. Like he's still fast enough to do all that and then make acrobatic catches and pick up yards after the catch. So I for a 3rd round pick, because I don't even think they signed him. He's just an offseason addition. For a 3rd round pick they can easily get out of. Like I think that was really shrewd by the Giants, and I agree that it was a good process because there's probably aren't 5 teams in the league who got less out of their tight ends last year than the Giants. This was a pretty cost-effective way and low-risk way to get from the bottom of the league to maybe towards the top.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it could be any addition. I mean, they made some pretty good moves to strengthen their receiving core, I think.
Paris Campbell, Jalen Hyatt in the 3rd round.
Hodgins isn't bad. Like Hodgins was actually pretty good last year. So it's like they have some dudes there. If Daniel Jones can continue to progress, he's cut down on the turnovers. If you can start to see a little bit more aggressiveness and taking shots downfield, right. Then all of a sudden the offense is starting to look really scary, right?
He can't be a top QB until that happens, really. Like to live up to the contract, he absolutely needs to hit shots down the field. And hey, like Jalen Hurts was terrible at throwing to the middle of the field, and then what did they do? They were like, let's get the best middle of the field statistically wide receiver in the league. And all of a sudden, like Jalen Hurts is pretty good throwing in the middle of the field. And I think that's kind of the same logic with the Giants. It's like, okay, we've got the worst vertical threat quarterback in the league. Instead of just avoiding vertical threats for wide receiver, let's help them out and get like a vertical threat at tight end and receiver.
Well, I think that's a little bit unfair. I mean, yeah, I'm not saying that Daniel Jones is good vertically, but neither were his receivers. How much of that is on those guys? It's got to be at least somewhat. The way I look at it is if Daboll can scheme open guys, and you feel confident about just like getting people open who, aren't super high level like talents or whatever, you might as well make those guys fast. So if you can get them in space, they've got a little bit more juice, because that's how I feel about like Campbell is not really moving me. Hyatt, we'll see. He could be good, but I don't want to put too much faith into a 3rd round rookie who I thought played a pretty limited role in college. So we'll see. I think getting any sort of receiving talent for the Giants is a big deal.
Yeah, I think so too. And I think the focus on getting vertical guys is good because you're right. Like it's not all on Daniel Jones. I think some of it was, and I think some of it was. I think Slayton was a decent enough vertical threat. There are times where guys seemed open downfield and he was a bit too conservative, but that can get better with better players around him. Absolutely.
Right.
And it was definitely not having guys like that around was a huge part of it. So it's needed. It's a needed addition. And I think they did it in a cost efficient way, giving up 2 third-round picks for Waller and Hyatt, and then not giving Paris Campbell too big of a deal. And Paris Campbell can still be a nice piece of a depth in receiving core.
Get a little bit. You can get a little gadgety with Paris Campbell. You talk about guys in space making plays after the catch.
Yeah, I kind of like Paris Campbell, but I digress.
Ohio State legend. Theo, your next guy, Jawan Taylor, Jags to the Chiefs.
Yeah.
Let's hear about it.
It's a really good signing for the Chiefs. It's a really good signing.
A signing that Theo likes. Oh my gosh.
This one I liked more than Davenport and Tremaine Edmonds. Look, he was 6th in PFF's pass blocking efficiency last year. He was top 10 in that. And when I watched him, I saw a guy with long arms, with patience, with a good punch and the ability to stay connected and kind of contort his body. The one thing about him, I would say from a negative in terms of pass blocking, is his explosiveness out of his stance. It's a lot of little steps instead of one big one. And I think that can kind of cause him to underset and be vulnerable to an inside counter because he's got to, if you imagine there's an edge rusher threatening up the sideline, you didn't take a very big first step. So to reach the guy going around the arc, you've kind of got to turn your body. And when you turn your body and if they counter back inside, you can get put in a bad position. And that's the type of move that worries me about Jawan Taylor. But, he's a tough guy to beat right through. Like I saw in the playoff game, Chris Jones try to go through him and he would lock up Chris Jones. There were times where you would snatch and trap him. So the bull rush, his arms would be extended from the defensive lineman. And he was able to kind of pull him down and use that leverage or balance against the defensive player. So yeah, just a real sticky player in pass blocking. And the Chiefs, they got Mahomes and Kelsey, and they'll be you need a lot of pass protection. So to go from Orlando Brown, who was 50th last year in this pass blocking efficiency stat, to someone who is 6th and upgrade like that, I think that's a big deal. The thing is, not a good run blocker at all, I think. Like when he would climb to the second level, Jawan Taylor just never would make contact with anybody from what I saw. So, but it's the Chiefs, they're not going to be running it a whole lot, right? You have Patrick Mahomes. Why not throw it 30, 40 times a game, So I think it was a good pickup. Like as an all around lineman, pass blocking and run blocking, maybe Orlando Brown has an argument, but as a pure pass protector, I think the Chiefs were able to upgrade. And we'll see about the other side because I believe Donovan Smith is on the other side, and he was looking a little washed last season. So I don't know if Wiley and Orlando Brown, I don't know if they upgraded both of those two, but the signing of Jawan Taylor by himself was a good solution. And I think going from Orlando Brown to him was a pretty fair gamble from the Chiefs.
And they got Donovan Smith is not exactly a game-changing run blocker himself, no?
I don't think he's a game-changing anything at this point. Last year was pretty brutal.
I feel like that might be interesting for them. It's definitely something to watch out for.
Yeah. Their interior is so good that they can still probably mask some things with extra tight ends on the field and chips. And let's for the most part, let's just try to attack the A gaps. But yeah, you're right that the run blocking situation from both tackles is a little bit rough. So definitely something to keep an eye on in terms of ways to attack the Chiefs or weaknesses that offense has.
Yeah, for sure. Well, we're getting down to it here. I don't know how we're doing on time, but my next guy
We're at exactly 1 hour as you said that.
Oh, wow.
What does
That's
he know?
what are the odds of that, man? Anyway,
But we won't be when you listen to this on the recording because we cut some.
yeah,
stuff
I'm sure
out,
I'm sure the editing will.
But we're at about an hour, so we're in a good spot.
As far, yeah. All right. Well, my next guy is Cam Sutton from the Steelers to the Lions, and I was, and I think we all were really critical of the Lions draft because it was a really good corner class, and they didn't make an effort to attack that. Right? They didn't get any of those guys, especially like the first round. They went with Jahmyr Gibbs and Jack Campbell. Mm-hmm. But, you know, I do think that the additions that they made at the corner position in free agency were good. Cam Sutton and Emmanuel Mosley, and I still would have liked to have seen them add to that. But like Cam Sutton is a guy that I think the Steelers should have had high priority to keep around. I think he said that he wanted to stay in Pittsburgh. So I know Steelers fans liked how he played last year. He's got quick feet, good hips. He does a really good job of like hanging with receivers through like staying close to the hip. Right, he does a really good job at that. And he was pretty good at closing in and tackling on like underneath routes as well, like screens and stuff. He closes and gets underneath blockers pretty well. So like I like the Lions doing it. I like the Lions going out and bringing that guy in free agency. And I don't want to be like super critical and be like, oh, they have no corners now. They didn't do anything to improve their secondary. They did, right? Their safeties are better now. And they improved their safeties with Gardner Johnson, and then they got Brian Brandt in the draft, right? So then they get Cam Sutton and Emmanuel Mosley, you know, to shore up their cornerback room, and all of a sudden it's a pretty good secondary from what it has been in the past, and I don't want to be too critical of just like completely negating that. So I am excited for what Cam Sutton brings to the table for them. Again, I still would have liked to have seen them add more in the draft, but
yeah,
you know,
they could use a dude, but they've got good depth.
Right,
like, I like Jerry Jacobs.
They didn't get a superstar.
Right. If they could get a dude at corner, like a Jalen Ramsey, like one of those elite number one corners, and then like Cameron Sutton and Jerry Jacobs and Brian Branch and CJ Gardner Johnson and Kirby Joseph, like that all forms pretty good depth around them. But it's like, do they have one guy who you just don't have to worry about that they could put on an island and just leave alone?
Right.
No. And I think that's kind of what I would have liked to have seen them attack in the draft, as opposed to running back. Like if they would have drafted Christian Gonzalez and just rolled with, you know, David Montgomery and someone else in the backfield, I would have felt a little bit better about this team. But Cameron Sutton, I don't know why the Steelers let him walk and then didn't really replace it. Well, they got Patrick Peterson, but I think the Steelers...
Come on, man.
The Steelers,
how old is Patrick Peterson?
Patrick Peterson was pretty good last year. It's just... He's really old. You're right.
How old is he, man?
He's old. They drafted Joey Porter Jr. I don't know.
He will be 33 in a few days.
Sutton was a good deal. Sutton was a good deal. And we'll see how it plays out with the Steelers, you know, letting him walk. They did address the position with a big signing and a big draft pick. But it was a good bargain for the Lions. And I think he was better last season than Okudah. He was a bit more consistent. Okudah maybe had the better high-end reps when he would do the two-handed jam and totally shut someone down. But week to week, Sutton was the better player. So to trade away Okudah and get Sutton, I think it was decent. Although Okudah, we'll see. I still kind of think the one
criticism that you could give to Cam Sutton is that like last year is the only real like good year. Like I think it was 2021 where he kind of established himself as like a starter, right? Because I think that's when he was like the every down corner. But last year was the first time that he's really like stepped into a role, like stepped into being like the number one corner on a team. He was eighth, I think, in passer rating allowed. He had like 18 pass deflections and 3 interceptions.
Mm-hmm.
But like
yeah,
that's like half of that's like half of the production that he's had in his entire career was all last year.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the one thing that's a little bit scary. It's like, well, if that doesn't translate and if that doesn't continue and you just kind of revert to just being like a guy, then all of a sudden it's not looking like such a great signing. That would be the one concern, is maybe the Steelers think that's kind of a one-hit wonder, but I don't know.
Yeah, I think it's a good signing. I think those are the exact type of signings free agency is for. It's not really for the huge ones. It's not for, the absolute bank breakers. It's, get out better on the margins, sign some deals with guys who can outperform them. And that's what Cam Sutton is. I think that he can, that's kind of the low cost, good player that moves me in free agency more than the massive signings like a Tremaine Edmonds or to some extent even a Jawan Taylor. Like, free agency itself is an inefficient way to build a team because it's the most money for players that other teams didn't want, right? That's what free agency is. So it's not the most that's why I'm always a little bit skeptical of like massive free agent hauls, but pickups like Cam Sutton, those are the ones where there's value because
and that's what I was saying earlier. It's like what type of guy can you go pay $20 million in free agency?
Right.
Probably a guy that some other team was like, yeah, he's good, but I'm not paying him $20 million.
Mm-hmm.
Then that's how I feel about Edmonds, and that's how I feel about Jessie Bates. The two guys we've talked about today, and both of them are very good players, but it's just a little steep.
Yeah, it's not. When you're paying them in free agency, it's like you're saying that they're a top 2 or 3 player at their entire position, or that's how you're paying them, and it's not always the reality of the situation. Although Bates, like I said with the Falcons, it's like I get it a little bit more with the Falcons than the Bears because the Bears just could have paid Roquan and made Roquan happy, and the Falcons, they didn't have anybody to. Like, they were just like, let's just get some stars on defense, whatever it costs. Who cares if it's an overpay? Like, we have money. Like, who's getting paid on the Falcons?
Right.
I suppose so. You could say
Lindstrom. Grady Jarrett, I guess.
Getting paid. Ritter here in a couple of years, but
yeah, they got to prepare for the Ritter signing.
Ritter becomes the highest paid.
You got to start clearing the books now.
Well, Matt,
you do a 1-year deal because next year it's going to prevent you're going to want Ritter signed now before he inevitably breaks out.
Oh, so true.
They should sign Ritter to a second contract before he gets good.
Before he gets good, and then you have to get a whole bunch of money. I think that's super interesting. I wonder, like, let's say I don't even know. Could you extend him now? Is that even allowed?
I don't know.
Not sure.
I imagine you
it's
could if both sides wanted to sign a contract. Like, I'd imagine
I'll text Brad.
Probably could. I just don't know why you ever would sign a rookie after one season for either side. Because if you're the player, you would say, "Well, I can get better and get more money like later because contracts are always going up." So it's beneficial to wait if you're both the rookie and the team.
But if you're the player and you don't get better, and then you're kicking yourself that you didn't take that deal.
Well, who kind of did this is Jordan Love. Jordan Love signed a contract, and it's not his first year, but like they signed him to a second contract before they knew anything about him. And that concerns me about Jordan Love. It's like, where's the dog in you to say, I'm waiting till after this year and signing a bigger contract? Right?
He doesn't have that dog in it.
Why not bet on
that
yourself?
contract negotiating
Why are
dog?
you signing the contract before you've proven anything? If you think you're going to be good, you should wait a season and then sign the contract.
How long is the contract for? When does it?
It's like 2 or 3 years.
So it's what, through 2025?
Yeah, something like that. So like he'll be up for a big payday, but still, it's
like what? No, that's perfect.
Bet on yourself, man.
I think that's perfectly fine. It's not like he'll be out of his prime. This isn't a running back we're talking about here.
I guess. I don't know.
But I think that pretty much wraps things up for us. Let us know in the comments if there's anyone that you think we missed, if there's anyone that you guys really like, could be big or small signing. Appreciate you all tuning in. And as always, from the Stay Hot crew, we'll catch you all on the flippity flop.